What happens when a live television moment spirals into something no one expected? In this video, we are going to dive deep into a dramatic, cinematic, emotionally intense recreation of a shocking on-air clash. And tonight, everything erupts when Karoline Leavitt and Joy Behar collide in a confrontation that leaves the studio trembling and forces one of them to walk off the view for good. The lights above the studio hum quietly as the audience slowly filters in, taking seats that vibrate with an undercurrent of anticipation. There's something in the air today, something electric, something tense, something unsaid. Producers glide around the stage like ghosts preparing a ritual, adjusting microphones, counting cue cards, whispering into headsets. The iconic view table sits gleaming under the overhead lights, polished so well that reflections ripple across its surface like shifting water. Karoline Leavitt stands just off stage, hidden behind a curtain that barely conceals her. Her palms are slightly sweaty, fingers tapping nervously against the fabric of her blazer. She breathes deeply, forcing calm over the swirl of anticipation that seems to tighten around her chest like a vice. She's done this before. Countless interviews, countless appearances. But today feels different. There's a tension she can't shake, an electricity that hums in her ears, a gnawing premonition that something is about to break. Meanwhile, Joy Behar is already seated at the table, adjusting her notes and smiling at the audience with practiced ease. But her eyes flicker constantly to the offstage monitors, scanning, calculating. She's been on live television for decades. She knows instinctively when a guest carries an edge. And today, that edge is palpable. The camera operators take their places, silently communicating through subtle hand gestures, their lenses already trained to capture every twitch, every micro-expression. The studio director calls out from the booth, "We're live in 5, 4, 3, 2. The hum of anticipation swells, a taut string ready to snap. The show begins with its usual opening flourish, bright lights, upbeat music, applause filling the air. Karoline steps onto the stage, her smile carefully measured, her voice steady, but with a hint of underlying tension. She greets the hosts, exchanges pleasantries, but the atmosphere feels charged, electric. There's a crackling energy between her and Joy, an invisible thread pulling tight with every measured word. Joy leans slightly forward, her tone warm but laced with subtle challenge. "Karoline, it's great to have you here. But I have to say, some of your recent comments have stirred up quite a reaction. How do you respond to that?" Karoline's lips press together, a flash of controlled irritation crossing her face. She takes a measured breath, her fingers tightening around the edge of her chair. "Well, Joy, I think it's important to look beyond the headlines and really understand the nuance in what was said," she replies, her tone even. Yet there's a steeliness that cuts just beneath the surface. The camera shifts, capturing the tension like a predator stalking its prey. Joy leans back, letting silence linger for a beat longer than necessary, her smile never fading, but her eyes narrowing slightly. "Nuance, you say? Some would argue it's more than nuance. Some might call it reckless," she says, the words dripping with insinuation, with the weight of an unspoken accusation. Karoline's gaze sharpens, her composure fraying just enough to hint at the storm beneath. "I understand how it might come across that way, but context matters. And I would hope that as seasoned journalists, we can discuss context without immediately jumping to judgment," she counters, her voice rising just enough to pierce the tension, commanding attention from everyone in the studio. The audience shifts in their seats, sensing the friction. The producers exchange nervous glances. The show is live, and nobody knows exactly where this is heading. There's a palpable uncertainty, a dangerous unpredictability in the air. The director's voice is barely audible over the monitors. "Keep rolling. Stay on them." Joy's lips curve into a sharper smile, a hint of mischief flashing in her eyes. "Of course, context matters. But sometimes, Karoline, context can't excuse certain choices. It can't excuse the impact words have, the consequences they carry. Don't you think?" Karoline's jaw tightens. Her hands rest flat on the table now, knuckles whitening. "I think it's easy to focus on the consequences without considering intent. And intent is critical. Misinterpretation happens when people are quick to judge, she says, her words measured, yet edged with an undeniable fire. The dialogue grows more intense, each line a calculated maneuver in an invisible chess game. Joy's questions are sharp, probing, designed to unsettle. Karoline's responses are precise, defensive, but there's a vulnerability lurking beneath the practiced poise, the tension between maintaining composure and succumbing to frustration. Suddenly, Joy leans forward, her voice taking on a sharper edge. So you're saying essentially that if people are offended, it's their fault for misunderstanding? That the responsibility lies entirely on the audience? The room feels smaller, the lights harsher. Karoline's chest rises and falls with rapid breaths, the pressure building. She stares directly into Joy's eyes, a storm threatening to break. I'm saying context matters, yes, but more importantly, that dialogue matters. And if we start assigning blame without conversation, we lose the opportunity to truly understand each other. She responds, her tone rising, controlled yet tinged with exasperation. There's a brief pause. The audience holds its collective breath, the tension almost tangible, like a live wire sparking across the stage. Joy tilts her head slightly, her expression shifting from amusement to calculated provocation. Dialogue matters, but at what point does dialogue turn into deflection? At what point do words become excuses? Karoline leans back, her hands gripping the table, the muscles in her jaw tightening. Her voice wavers slightly, just enough to reveal the strain. I refuse to let conversation be reduced to simplistic attacks. That's not what dialogue is, and I will not apologize for expressing my perspective, for advocating what I believe is truth, she asserts, her words ringing with a conviction that reverberates through the studio. Joy's smile fades, replaced by a steely glare. The subtle warmth she projected moments ago is gone, replaced by an unyielding edge that cuts into the air between them. Truth, Karoline, is subjective, but accountability is not. And that's where the problem lies, she says, her tone deliberate, piercing, a verbal scalpel. Karoline's hands tremble slightly as she rests them on her lap, drawing a breath she doesn't release immediately. Her eyes dart momentarily to the crew, the cameras, the audience, then back to Joy, unwavering. Accountability matters, yes, but the way you frame it, the tone, the delivery, it feels accusatory rather than inquisitive. That's not productive. That's not conversation, she counters, her voice steadying. Yet the fire in her eyes betrays the tension threatening to spill over. The dialogue escalates with every word, a war of intellects and personalities playing out under the unforgiving scrutiny of live cameras. Every gesture, every inflection, every fleeting expression is magnified, dissected, scrutinized by an audience that senses the approaching explosion. The producers shift nervously in the wings, exchanging hushed whispers and anxious glances. The director's jaw tightens, his hands hover over the console, ready to cut if necessary. But there's a hesitation, a recognition that something extraordinary is unfolding live, unfiltered. The tension between Karoline and Joy is now a palpable force, an invisible electric charge that courses through the studio. The audience senses it, the crew feels it, and even the cameras seem to lean closer, hungry for every nuanced shift. The line between professional discourse and personal confrontation blurs, and neither party is willing to back down. Then, in a moment that seems frozen in time, Joy leans forward, her gaze locking onto Karoline's with an intensity that stops the room. So you're telling me, really telling me, that there's no responsibility on your part? That you can't see how your words might have hurt people? Karoline's shoulders stiffen, her voice rising with the tension she's fought to contain. I am aware of the impact, Joy, but awareness does not mean surrendering my voice. It does not mean capitulating to reactionary outrage without understanding the context. That's not accountability. That's fear masquerading as responsibility, she declares, the words slicing through the studio air with surgical precision. The audience murmurs, a low ripple of energy coursing through the room. The tension is now thick enough to taste, hanging heavy over the table like storm clouds ready to break. Joy's eyes narrow further, the challenge clear, her voice taking on a colder edge. Fear or not, Karoline, it's not just about context. It's about the consequences of what you say and how you say it. And that's something you seem unwilling to accept. She fires back, each word deliberate, a spark igniting a powder keg. Karoline leans forward, her hands flat on the table, her gaze unflinching. I will not be bullied into silence under the guise of accountability. I will stand by my words, my beliefs, and my right to express them, even when it makes people uncomfortable, she says, the conviction in her voice resonating across the studio. A stunned silence fills the room. The cameras capture the tension like a live tableau, two forces colliding with unstoppable energy.